Hi, I'm Greg Dell, and today I'm here with attorney Victor Pina. How are you, Victor?
Doing well.
Good. Today I want to talk about a company we've spoken about a lot, and probably the one that you've had the most claims with, which is the Unum Disability Insurance Company. They're basically the world's largest disability insurance carrier for both group and individual. And I always like to talk about them. Over the last 10 years, we've done multiple videos discussing Unum. And what are the latest trends that you're seeing in terms of the most common reason right now that Unum is denying claims?
Well, Greg, Unum, compared to other insurance companies, you see a lot of common trends. But Unum, more recently, I've seen a lot of claims that are being denied that have been on claim for like more than 5 years. So it's surprising. A lot of people expect to, once they've been on claim for, several years, a lot of people think that, they're not going to be terminated and, it's kind of a guaranteed thing, but it's not, unfortunately. So a lot of claims that I've seen with Unum recently, one in particular, the claimant was on claim for, I think, 7 years.
Okay.
And no change in her condition. The condition she was suffering from was one that was progressive and, basically nothing that was going to improve. And basically what happened is Unum did some surveillance. They found something that they felt was inconsistent with what her claim limitations were, and then they terminated her. But there had been no change. There were no change in the medical records or anything like that.
What was that person on claim for?
Well, she was on claim basically, back condition, which is one of the major conditions that people are on claim for. It was a progressive claim. It wasn't a part of an injury. It was actually a degenerative condition, and so, not something that anyone expected to improve. So when they uncovered the surveillance, they basically relied on that.
Now, when you say surveillance, you're talking about video surveillance?
Yes.
So did they hired someone and followed her around?
Right. They hired a third-party vendor, followed her around. Basically, she was doing something, a part-time position, kind of just doing a daycare. Nothing that was really inconsistent. Nothing. She actually admitted to the insurance company they were aware that she was doing these things, but they sent this surveillance video to a doctor, and then they had the doctor comment and relied on the doctor's opinions.
Okay. So when we talk about this trend that you're seeing more denials on people that have been on claim for 5 years, it seems to me that Unum would be, combing through their files and saying, let's look, we got a lot of people on claim now, let's see if we can slim down
Right.
the number of claims we have.
Right. It seems that way.
So what do you like to tell clients how they could avoid this possible denial when they've been on claim for a while? What do they got to keep doing in order to improve their chances of staying on claim?
Well, definitely recommend, like I stated earlier, that no matter how long you've been on claim, it's not a guarantee you're going to continue to be approved. The insurance company is going to continue to do their periodic reviews, and so it's important that you continue to see your doctors, you continue to treat with your physicians, make sure that you don't skip any appointments, and most importantly, your doctors need to be aware that the medical records and the notes need to be very descriptive, and they need to make sure that they're documenting everything that you're complaining about. So. It's you don't want to get complacent with the medical records and your doctor's visits, no matter how long you've been on claim.
So what happens is people get on claim for a while and they get comfortable.
Right.
And the doctors start documenting less and less in terms of how they're writing down their complaints and what's going on.
Right.
And Unum goes ahead and says, well, we looked at your last office visit and it said that you were doing okay, or the doctor didn't document any objective findings, or the doctor didn't document any restrictions and limitations for you, and the doctor didn't do the 6 or 7 routine tests that the doctor really doesn't do anymore for that claimant because he knows the claimant had this progressive degenerative condition and it didn't go away, obviously. And so what happens is you have a company like Unum who takes advantage of that and then says, no restrictions, limitations, no medical support for your subjective complaints.
Right.
So that's basically what we end up seeing all the time when we end up getting these records. So in addition to this trend of Unum denying claims for people who have been on for a while, what are you seeing from the people that have been calling you that just applied recently and then got denied? What's been the basis for those denials?
Well, a lot of times along the same lines, a diagnosis doesn't necessarily equate with a disabling condition. So a lot of people think that just because they've been diagnosed with a condition, they're automatically going to qualify for disability benefits. So it's very important that the doctors are very clear that they're documenting everything you're experiencing. A lot of times what you'll see in applications, a doctor will just say, okay, a claimant is disabled and totally disabled, unable to return to work, and that's not going to be enough for the insurance company. They want specific reasons supporting the doctor's opinions, and they want specific restrictions and limitations. So it's very important that the applications are very detailed.
So it sounds good what you're saying, like in terms of what a claimant needs, but how easy is it for a claimant to get that kind of information in order to support their claim?
I mean, a lot of times it's not as easy as it sounds, especially with a new diagnosis. Really, a lot of times it falls on the doctor. A doctor not necessarily, having dealt with an insurance company or a disability claim as often as you'd like, and so, they feel that, just, filling out the forms in a simple manner is going to be enough. But a lot of times it's very important that you have an attorney who's had a lot of experience with handling these types of claims, kind of speak with the doctor and make sure that the doctor understands the importance of filling out these forms in a very detailed fashion. So, it really comes down to making sure the doctor's on board and understanding how these forms need to be filled out.
Now, I know you have a lot of Unum claimants that you represent currently. What's the advantage when somebody has you managing their claim as opposed to, and this is a person who's getting paid, or you did the appeal and you won and now you're managing the claim. What's the advantage to you being involved on a daily basis in managing their claim versus the claimant trying to do it on their own?
Well, I mean, a claimant, especially, filling out an application, or if it's the first time on claim, a claimant isn't familiar with the process. It can be very tedious. Like I mentioned before, it's not just a matter of submitting an application, getting approved, and then just letting it go. It's an ongoing process. The insurance company is going to continue to request periodic updates, and a lot of times, depending on the disability policy, there's changes. So the claimant needs to be aware, of those changes, and it's very important to involve an attorney at times that's going to be familiar with the process and that can kind of pick through those the disability policy.
What kind of change are you talking about?
One of the most common changes you'll see, especially in group disability policies, is a change in the definition of disability. It's pretty common to see a change after the 24-month mark. So once a claimant has been on claim for 24 months, it's common for the definition to change from what we call own occupation to any occupation. So basically, during the first 24 months, the insurance company is evaluating you for your inability to work in your own occupation. After those 24 months, they're looking to see if you can work in any gainful occupation.
And when we talked about the common trends of denials that we see, that's probably one of the top 3 reasons we see a denial is because the definition of disability changed from the own occupation to the any occupation.
Right. It's one of the most common places to see a denial.
And then since we were talking about these common trends for denials, I'm seeing with Unum, they'll do an evaluation and then maybe they'll get a voc rehab expert to look at the occupation, and let's assume the occupation is somebody who is a maybe like a vice president of a company, or maybe they're a engineer or something, like that. And they'll say, well, we looked at the dictionary of occupational titles and we saw that your occupation is sedentary. And we see that you can do a sedentary job. And I always have a problem with that, where they minimize the job to the point to just say, well, your job requires you to sit for 6 and 8 hours and we think you can sit, so therefore you could do your job. How do you address that? Because obviously when you go to apply for a job or you show your credentials, it doesn't say on the resume, I can sit for 6 to 8 hours, therefore I'm eligible for your job.
Right. Well, it's really important to really magnify and make sure that the insurance company understands the importance of your other duties of the occupation. Like you said, it's, our occupation is inherently sedentary. We sit for most of the time, but it's not limited to just sitting at a desk all day. So it's really important that the insurance company understands exactly what your occupation consists of. And like you mentioned earlier, vocational analysis, sometimes it's a good idea to have your own vocational analysis done by a vocational rehab specialist. Especially when the insurance company did their own, you want one to kind of counter
and
that.
So we work with our own experts around the country for the vocational rehab.
Right.
And what other types of things do you do to deal with that occupational evaluation. And more so, I see it not so much in the own occupation stage, but when it changes to any gainful occupation, and using how do you use the voc expert in that situation?
Well, apart from using it as a response to whatever vocational analysis they may have or the insurance company may have performed, sometimes you can use it as a means to your doctor may not necessarily understand your occupation as clearly as they'd like, and you can have your doctor comment. Sometimes you can use it in combination with a functional capacity evaluation. And strengthen your claim even more.
So now that you mentioned functional capacity evaluation, what is that, and when do you like to use those evaluations?
Well, a functional capacity evaluation is a really good way of kind of documenting objectively what a claimant's restrictions and limitations are. A lot of times the medical records may not be as detailed, or the insurance company may be unclear as to what the claimant's restrictions and limitations are. So basically what it is, it's usually like a 3 or 4 hour evaluation, typically performed by a physical therapist, and usually the claimant will have to undergo a series of activities, and then whoever the evaluator will write up a report that kind of documents, like I said, objectively what the claimant's restrictions and limitations are.
And what kind of weight do you think a disability insurance company gives to those functional capacity evaluation reviews?
The more detailed, usually, the best functional capacity evaluations will contain validity measures. I would say that a functional capacity evaluation with those measures in place would carry a lot more weight than one without.
And then the last thing I want to talk about is this concept that we always hear about, and almost every claimant who gets denied sees, is it says, well, your subjective complaints don't match the objective evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And so what type of objective evidence do you try to help your clients to obtain? And let's say it's a neck or back type condition, which is probably about 50% of the claims that we get. What type of objective evidence do you think is really helpful for a claimant in order to match their subjective complaints?
Well, it depends on the claimant's symptoms. Apart from the functional capacity evaluation, if the claimant's experiencing sort of neurological symptoms or neuropathies, and a good EMG, some nerve conduction studies that will kind of document those symptoms, and those tests and reports are definitely good to include as well.
And what other types of diagnostic testing? You said EMG, a nerve conduction study test. What else would be helpful to show what's going on with their neck or back?
Sometimes it's good to include letters, from people that are around the claimant more often, that kind of see the claimant on a daily basis and are very familiar. The insurance company obviously can't see the claimant in person on a daily basis. Letters from doctors that kind of document and in detail, what the claimant's restrictions and limitations are. And I think the doctor would be the best person to really provide that information.
So that would be an additional medical record. And then also, of course, you have the MRIs, CAT scan, X-rays, those types of things to show what's going on. But it's interesting that you can try to argue that a letter from the doctor with specific tests or a letter from other people who know the claimant can try to be used in culmination with the objective evidence to try to say, look, here's all the complaints, and I'm someone else who's evaluated the patient, or I know the patient, and here's what's going on with them. So you have to look at that in combination with the objective evidence. So if you're having any issues with Unum at all at any stage of the claim, or if you're even just considering filing for disability benefits with Unum, feel free to call any of our lawyers. We'll always offer you a free consultation, and we'll let you know immediately whether or not we can assist you.